Thanks for joining us, Kierra.
Alrighty, thank you, Arlen, for that wonderful introduction, and thanks for all of your help. I am Kierra Pickens, and thank you for dedicating your time to this webinar focused on understanding cultural intelligence. So I am actually from a suburb outside of Chicago, Schaumburg / the Hoffman Estates area. So I see everyone, well, the people who posted in the chat are from Illinois. So hello there. So I have actually worked as a consultant in the CPS school districts. So it's good to see the CPS teacher in the chat as well. Alrighty, so a little bit about me. My name again is Dr. Kierra Pickens. I am a PhD in LCPC. I'm licensed in Illinois and Texas. I have a PhD in international psychology with a focus in organizations and systems. And I've experience in the residential setting, crisis counseling, and private practice setting, as well as consulting in public schools, and also with doing professional developments focused on SEL and cultural intelligence with educators. And here are some of my specialties, as well as psychotherapy interests. Alrighty, so we will jump right in. So culture has several definitions and can be explained in different ways. So today we are learning about the 4 dimensions of cultural intelligence, but before we jump into that, I'll ask you guys a question and maybe you can pop it in the chat, or if, again, like Arlen said, if it's a little bit too long of an explanation, you can unmute yourselves. So I just wanted to ask about your best travel experience. Have you ever been put in a situation to where you've had to adjust your values, language, or practices in another part of the US or internationally? And I'll take a second, wait for some of those responses. And in the meantime, I'll give you my example. So I grew up with a large population of Nigerians. And so traditionally within my culture, an aunt or a mom is someone that is related to you, but in the Nigerian culture, an auntie is a woman that is a middle-aged elder, and then a mommy is a person that is an older elder, so someone who is of late senior adulthood. So I was not used to just calling individuals that weren't related to me aunt and mommy. All righty, do we have any other examples? Don't see, oh, okay. Oh, traveling to Turkey and wearing headscarves in certain spaces. That is so, yes, that is difficult to get used to because you have to get used to carrying a scarf. Thanks for sharing, Lauren. I also love Turkey. Very good experience. All righty. So there are several definitions of culture. And from the anthropological perspective, culture is learned and transmitted from generations, one generation to the next. And also it's done through socialization and encompasses those shared beliefs, customs, practices, and social behaviors. So from the sociological perspective, this focuses on shared meanings and practices that influence social interactions and behaviors. So this can include norms and roles that guide behaviors and also the way that individuals within societies interact or perceive themselves. Anyone else in the chat? Okay, that's Jennifer. Oh, okay. One more before we move forward. Sorry, I missed this one. Okay, a guest presenter in El Paso, Texas, and was working for several days, left the computer cord in the room. Oh, you had to speak to someone who only spoke Spanish. Oh, yes, okay. So language barriers, working through languages. Thanks for sharing, Jennifer. I'll make sure to keep this chat up. All righty. So moving forward, sorry guys, you have to get used to checking in the chat. So from the psychology perspective, this involves the beliefs, values, and customs and behavioral norms. And so this is focused on the relationship of those norms and how they influence emotions, thoughts, and actions. And this perspective also believes that the identity, cognition, emotion, and behavior are shaped by culture and vice versa. And from the international perspective, within this context, this exists among mostly groups and countries and regions. And so we are talking about individualism versus collectivism. And so from the individualistic perspective, it is believed that culture is mostly focused on certain individuals and then extended through groups and cultures. And then versus collectivism, you have your values, your customs, and your practices, and you kind of apply that to your life. And then you are focused on more of collectivist practices, which is checking in with your family and things before making decisions. All righty. So cultural intelligence involves the availability or involves the ability to understand how to appreciate and navigate cultural differences, as well as ways to interact appropriately with individuals from different cultural backgrounds. So cultural intelligence encompasses emotional, behavioral dimensions that include cultural knowledge, empathy, open-mindedness, communication skills, and the capacity for cultural adaptation, as well as learning. So there are 4 levels of cultural intelligence, and that includes cognitive, emotional, motivational, and metacognitive levels. So the first dimension that we're going to talk about is the behavioral cultural intelligence. So this basically overall is the ability to adjust your behavior. So this includes your actions, communication styles, nonverbal cues, and basically some of the things that we talked about before in the chat, which is me interacting with individuals and adjusting the way that I greet and call other people mommy or mother within that Nigerian context. And also we had Jennifer mention language barriers. So those are behavioral cultural intelligences. And so this also involves the way that you modify your actions and communicate. So basically, you are trying to see if you are able to reflect on certain behaviors and modify those behaviors based on your surroundings. So behavioral CQ encompasses skills such as adjusting your body language, gestures, tone of voice, and other behavioral cues to align with cultural norms and expectations. We have someone popping in the chat. Let me check. Okay, so we have a question. How might I affect others in this area around cultural intelligence? What step would you take first? Okay, so with behavioral CQ, most of the first steps would probably include being aware of your surrounding, being aware of who you are actually interacting with, and taking a step back to actually think about what adjustments should be made based on the person you're interacting with. So if it's a language barrier, do you need to think about certain words that you're using? And a lot of people from international backgrounds maybe will speak in broken language. And so an example of this would be slowing your words down, or if an individual is not grammatically forming a full sentence. And also we have to understand that, American English is different from English in different countries, especially, I'm not sure if you guys are aware of British English, but very different words than we use in America. So if you are interacting with someone who speaks a different language, just keep in mind that maybe you want to slow your pace down and maybe you want to use simpler words and also just kind of more direct words. Thank you for your question. Alrighty. So why is this important? This is important because as educators, you want to be able to establish rapport, build trust, and communicate effectively across cultures. And this can also extend to students, coworkers, and also the families. Especially in America, we have a lot of subcultures. And so sometimes we never know who has assimilated to the American culture and who is still, adjusting. So that could be language, customs, body language, etc. And here are some reflective questions. These are some questions that you can ask yourself if you are wanting to improve your behavioral cultural intelligence. So, for example, do I change my nonverbal behavior if needed during a cross-cultural interaction? So, and that could be, let's just say you are in a culture that greets people a certain way with like head nods or a bow. Are you adjusting yourself to do that? Are you adjusting yourself to wave? Or that could be, in American culture, sometimes we just smile instead of saying a formal greeting. So are you making those nonverbal adjustments? Do you vary your rate of speaking in a cross-cultural situation or conversation? That's kind of what I mentioned earlier in terms of being able to slow your pace. So for example, I was in Thailand and I was asking for chicken fried rice. And so when you speak Thai, there are differences in the tone. So for example, I was asking, oh, do you have khao pad khai? And they were so confused. But when I slowed it down and used a different tone, they were able to understand what I was saying. And lastly, do I change my verbal behavior or facial expressions when needed? So that pretty much goes back to maybe inquisitive thoughts or smiles. And also just with these points of reflection, have you done any of these as an educator? All right. Motivational cultural intelligence. So motivational cultural intelligence refers to an individual's willingness and ability to engage and adapt to diverse cultural situations. So this encompasses the intrinsic motivation to learn about and interact with people from different cultural backgrounds. So basically, in a nutshell, how motivated are you to learn? Because, sometimes, as you know, if you're not motivated, then how are you going to change things? How are you going to improve on things if you don't have that push? So what is really driving you to make these changes? So motivational CQ involves a positive attitude towards cultural diversity and a curiosity about others, as well as a desire to build meaningful relationships across cultural boundaries. And this, as educators, can be applied to um, experiencing or interacting with cultures or families from different cultures than your own. So that could be students, families, or even coworkers. Alrighty. And developing CQ requires a certain level of self-awareness, reflection, and commitment to personal growth. Why is this important? Self-awareness, reflection, and a commitment to personal growth also involves different levels of trust and also being able to reflect on if you are building trust with not only your coworkers, but also with your students as well as those families that you're working with. So these reflective questions are you confident in your abilities to socialize with others from cultures that are unfamiliar to you? And sometimes you don't have to be, but if you're not, maybe that's a question to jot down or an area for improvement. Do you enjoy interacting with people from different cultures? If you don't, maybe that's a point of, self-awareness that you need to kind of ask yourself, why do you not enjoy acting with others from cultures of different than your own, or why do you? Do you have a curiosity to learn about different cultures? So maybe take a second right now to reflect on that and jot down your experience of interacting with others from different cultures. Are you comfortable? Do you feel like you need areas for improvement? And then we have a couple things in here. All right, we have a question. What are the implications for schools around this work from your perspective? So the implications for schools would be making sure that there are certain levels of PDs that are administered, maybe in the beginning of the year or towards the end of the year, to make sure that they are providing education around cultural competence as well as cultural intelligence. And I think also getting data related to individuals or students from different backgrounds, like what percentage of students are a certain culture, and how much do you need to invest on understanding that culture, especially since some of those cultural practices may be foreign to you as an individual. And that could be concerning, work ethic versus school attendance, which comes up sometimes. And that could also be the language barrier between educators and families. And that can come up in terms of just being able to communicate about basic needs of students. Thanks for that question. Right, before we move on. And the last question is, can I deal with stressors of adjusting to a new cultural context? And so basically, to sum this one up, this is basically saying, like, if you are uncomfortable with a new culture or being in a new cultural context, can you work through those stressors? Obviously, we know that stress plays a big part of life and they're always going to exist. So how do you navigate through culture related or stress related to cultures? All righty. So now we are at cognitive cultural intelligence. So cognitive cultural intelligence refers to the knowledge and understanding of cultural practices, beliefs, values, and norms that are different than your own. And it involves the cognitive aspects of cross-cultural competencies, including awareness of cultural similarities and differences, as well as being able to actually interpret and make sense of culture. So developing cultural or cognitive cultural intelligence involves exposing yourself to different experiences, education, and also differences among different cultures than your own. And so you are pretty much doing a lot of reflection of your own cultural biases and assumptions. And this pretty much enables individuals to navigate multicultural environments, communicate across cultural boundaries, and build positive relationships from people from diverse backgrounds. So sometimes you're taking a step back and asking yourself, am I exposing myself to these different cultures? And if I am, okay, do I know what I'm being exposed to? Do I understand where this person is coming from when they communicate a certain way? Why is this important? This helps us navigate multicultural environments. Why is that important? You want to be able to build relationships with others. And so we are all different. Again, we are, in the US, and we have a lot of subgroups and subcultures. And it's important to be aware of that, especially when you are interacting professionally, because sometimes the way that a person communicates can come off as rude, maybe judgmental, and maybe it's because they are from a contrasting culture than your own. So in terms of cognitive CQ, some of the reflective questions that you can ask yourself are, do I know the marriage systems of other cultures? Do I know the rules and values of other cultures? Do I understand practices, arts, and customs of that culture? Do I understand the religious beliefs of those cultures? And if you understand some of these practices or even beliefs, then you are able to interact and build relationships a little bit better. Any questions before we move forward? All right, no question. All right. Metacognitive cultural intelligence. So this is our last dimension. And so basically, this is different from cognitive cultural intelligence because you're actually doing more of the regulating and you're actually still taking a step back and figuring out what you know and how to put those things into practice. So this is where self-awareness plays a large role. So this is really the ability to monitor, regulate, and reflect on your own cultural knowledge, understanding, and behavior. And then it involves pretty much the higher order cognitive processes that enable individuals to think about and manage their own cultural learning and adapting to different diverse situations. So this is a lot of self-management, right? So if you are in a multicultural situation, you are actually employing some of these practices and thinking about whether you were able to employ those practices or not. And so metacognitive CQ plays a role in enhancing an individual's cultural competence and effectiveness in multicultural settings. And so within the education, let's see, one second. I have one more question. Okay, so this is a comment. Sounds like much of this work starts with self, right? Yes. So a lot of these questions, the reflective questions, are questions that you're asking yourself. And then based on the reflection that you're doing, you're thinking about how you need to improve on some of these practices. You're thinking about steps that you can take in order to improve your behavior or your thoughts or the way that you interact with others from diverse backgrounds. And also, some of these practices are maybe a little bit easier done if you are immersing yourself in different cultures, right? So if you're traveling, maybe it's a little bit better to learn about a specific culture or region of the world if you are actually surrounded and immersed in that culture. And then going back and implementing those practices or what you've learned with maybe that population that you're interacting with, right? So for example, within Latin culture, you know, a lot of us travel. So let's just say you take a vacation to Mexico and maybe you pick up a few words, right? A few phrases, greetings, and you're able to learn how to communicate with some of your students or even their families. So that's relationship building. Even if you say a simple phrase of how are you doing, ¿Cómo estás in Spanish, right? You're showing that you are putting yourself in an uncomfortable position in order to build a relationship with maybe that Spanish speaking person or that person of Latin descent. Thank you for your question. All righty. So how to improve the practices in behavioral CQ as it applies to metacognitive CQ. You can practice self-awareness, self-regulation, and self-reflection. So what this looks like is taking time, jotting down a few notes, asking yourself questions. How can I improve my behavioral CQ as it applies to the metacognitive dynamic or dimension? And also, are you able to regulate yourself when you are in these situations? And that could be, are you able to change the way that you are feeling nervous when you're around these populations? Are you able to change the way that you respond? You know, sometimes we have different facial expressions when we feel like we don't understand something. Are you able to take a deep breath and think about how you want to interact with some of these people or some of these families? All right, reflective questions. Am I conscious of cultural knowledge that I am applying during cross-cultural interactions? And so this pretty much pertains to implementing some of the practices or procedures, planning. So are you applying some of the practices that you've planned to practice, right? Like an example that we just referenced. Are you actually practicing saying a phrase, right, in Spanish or a greeting? are you actually practicing the way that you're responding if you are encountering, a language, or if you're encountering a person who isn't aware of your culture? Do I adjust my cultural knowledge while interacting with others from different cultures? So adjusting your cultural knowledge while interacting with others is kind of close to application, but also, are you open to learning? Are you showing that you're open to learning by asking questions? Are you showing that you're open to learning by listening? And another reflective question is, am I aware of cultural knowledge that I'm using during these interactions? So are you aware that you're doing the thing? How do you know that you're actually improving? How do you know that you're being mindful of the skills that you're employing? So pretty much this is, are you giving yourself a pat on the back? Are you actually able to show yourself that you are doing what you said you would? Are you accomplishing some of these culture related goals that you said you would set, right? And also, have you done any of these as an educator? So I am going to go to the next slide, and I kind of want you guys to um, think about, oops, go back, some of these dimensions. So it has the cognitive, metacognition, behavioral, and motivational dimensions. And so from some of these dimensions, do you need to improve? Are you doing okay? Any questions or comments so far? Anything that you need clarity on? Okay, so we want the past two slides. Yes, I will go back in a second. Okay, thanks. All right. So with some of these questions or some of these items, I'm wondering if some of these are things that you probably never thought of, right? So one of the motivational CQ questions or things that you would rate yourself on is, I enjoy living in cultures that are unfamiliar to me. So maybe that's part of, you know, being having that intrinsic motivation to change, right? Are you motivated to live around unfamiliar cultures and immerse yourself in cultures as a way to learn? Maybe that's something you never thought about. And cognitive CQ holds some of the questions related to arts and crafts of cultures. That's something that was actually foreign to me before. Just learning about different arts from around the world. That's another way that you are improving your cultural intelligence. Sometimes you have to learn where certain artifacts are from, certain styles of art, things like that. Alrighty, so I am going to go back to the last couple of slides. Jennifer, I think just let me know when you want to. I think was it motivational or cognitive? Okay. Okay, I'll spend some time on this one. Maybe you want to jot some notes and go back to some of the reflective questions. Alrighty. And metacognitive. All right. So any questions or comments about any of these items or things that came up for you? All righty. What does a culturally intelligent individual look like? So, just to put it all together, maybe this person demonstrates an understanding in learning new cultures or an interest in understanding new cultures. I think that is probably the biggest one, right? And if you are demonstrating that understanding or interest in understanding, maybe your behavior looks different, maybe the way you think about a culture is different, and maybe the way you attempt to interact with people from different cultures looks different. We have a question. How do we contact you if we want you to come to our schools? I will provide my contact information at the end, which is probably the next slide. Okay. Any more questions? Okay, one more question. Are you able to share your email to contact you for professional development? Yes, I will share my contact information and email after this slide. Okay, and then I will review the slides shortly because we have some questions to um, about some of the previous slides. So I will definitely go back and review, and then we will go from there. Okay. Any other questions? Alrighty, so a culturally intelligent individual, you're able to adapt to different cultural settings, and you are able to deal and lead with curiosity when you are exposed to other cultures. And sometimes this involves a little bit of self-reflection before you are leading and asking questions, right? Like, are you asking questions in language that is understandable, and are you leading with curiosity? Because sometimes you can ask questions in a way that may not come across as, a curious individual, so to speak. All right. Are you empathic and sensitive to feelings, perspectives, and experiences of others from diverse cultural backgrounds? So, empathy, right? If you have empathy with with others from various cultural backgrounds, what does this look like? This looks like being curious. This can also look like being able to see their perspective, right? Like in terms of language barriers. Have you ever traveled not knowing the language? How do you think that feels for individuals that are coming to different schools or, in different settings? That can be challenging, right? So do you have empathy for those people? And are you willing to adjust the way that you're communicating and interacting with them to make them feel a little bit more comfortable? So have you been in that situation? Have you been in a situation where you've had to adjust your customs or practices? And before, someone mentioned wearing a headscarf, something that, is maybe foreign to you, but a part of a custom, right? Sometimes learning even how to like put the scarf on properly. Sometimes there are cultures that have specific techniques to that. All right. And are you holding self-awareness regarding cultural assumptions, biases, and limitations? And biases, I think this can come into play, especially if you aren't exposed to various cultures. So sometimes if you haven't been exposed to certain populations of people, maybe you have a thought, right? Maybe you have a prejudice in your mind about how you think someone is. And it's okay to have a prejudice, but are you addressing the prejudice, right? Are you making it so that you are getting something positive out of this bias? Are you practicing positive discrimination, right? And positive discrimination is advocacy, so to speak. Are you able to think about the bias that you're holding and challenge that bias? Are you able to work through the bias? Are you reflecting on ways that certain biases play a role in your life as a professional, personally, or as an educator? All righty. And ultimately, if you're a culturally intelligent individual, do you have a global mindset? Are you able to understand the interconnectedness of cultures? Are you able to understand that everyone is different? Are you able to accept that everyone is different? What does that look like? What does that level of acceptance look like? All right, so I will go back to the beginning, just so we are able to review some of the slides. For those of you who need some of these slides. So these were some of the different definitions of culture that we went over as it applies to anthropology, sociology, psychology, and the international perspective of culture. All right, and this slide, should have spent more time on it, is cultural intelligence in a nutshell. All righty. The behavioral cultural intelligence. Motivational. And then we had cognitive, metacognitive, as well as some of these items that you can apply to your own cognition or your own level of self-reflections. And these are also on the side, have the dimensions. So we have the metacognition, the cognitive, behavioral, and the motivational. And then we had what a culturally intelligent individual looks like. And then questions, thoughts, wonders, wishes. Any questions or thoughts, wishes, things on your mind? All right. All right. Because I have encountered students and parents that come from cultures where they have different views of women. Okay. And these students feel that they don't have to show women respect. That's a big one. How would you navigate situations such as these? Well, that's really interesting, especially since people of different cultures, especially as it applies to the US, we are, well, I mean, as a woman, right? We are considered to be double minorities if we are of a specific culture and gender. So I think this is an interesting question because we are, wanting to advocate for minorities, especially women or individuals of different cultures. So in terms of respect, I think it could be interesting if you, as an educator, provide ground rules about what it means to respect all individuals, right? And so if you're thinking of all individuals, can you include what it looks like to respect individuals when it comes to language or when it comes to boundaries, right? And I also think that you can practice positive discrimination. And so positive discrimination is a term that we use in the international psychology world. And it's pretty much another term for advocacy. And so within that, you would be educating some of your students or even parents about what it means to respect women within your cultural context. So within the American culture, what does it look like to respect women? What does it look like to help them assimilate to respecting women since it's not a practice that they have? And it sounds like you have the understanding of why it's not happening from the cultural context. So that level of understanding is appropriate. That's the first step. But you can also give them actionable items and plant the seed. This is how you respect a woman. This is how we think about women here. And acknowledge that you understand where they come from, why things aren't happening or why women are being a certain way. But you can also, provide them the context of why, in the US, we treat women this way. This is why we have such a large level of respect for women. I have a question. Thank you for your expertise. Oh, you're welcome. Do you have a book yet? No, I do not have a book, but I have, well, kind of. My dissertation is on the mental health seeking attitudes of South African college students. And so that includes actually some of the different help seeking attitudes within different cultural contexts and why certain individuals of different cultures think of mental health in a certain way. And I think also just with the last situation, our last question that Lauren asked, this could be applicable just even within the help seeking context, right? Like, why do certain people of different colors or genders seek help more than others, or why don't they seek help more than others? So this is a means to target those populations, right? Like if individuals aren't being respected, maybe this is a reason why we need to target those populations and demonstrate a need or, put actionable items into place to respect students and also, families. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Any other questions or scenarios? Okay. All righty, and then here's my information. Here's my website and my email, and then I also have my number at the bottom. All righty. Well, I think we have about 10 more minutes.
All right, Kierra, we want to thank you so much for sharing your time with us this afternoon. Really appreciate these ways to improve our cultural intelligence. Hopefully everybody was able to get screenshots of the slides and information they need. For sure, take down Kierra's website and email address to be able to follow up with her and get anything you need. As I mentioned, this will all be recorded and sent to you tomorrow as well. So thank you for our attendees for your participation in the chat. If there's any final questions, you can type them into Q&A or chat. We appreciate the thank yous coming in. Hopefully, Kierra, you can see those. Everyone's appreciation for your time on this presentation this afternoon.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
All right, I don't see any other questions coming in. If you are done with the webinar, you can hover down in the lower right-hand corner of your Zoom screen, and you'll see a big red leave button that will log you out of the session for this afternoon, and I'll be following up via email tomorrow with a link to the recording and a link to the online evaluation as well, so you can get your 1 hour of professional development credit for your attendance today. Kierra, any final thoughts or questions from you about the event this afternoon?
Thank you for everyone's participation, and thank you for having me.
Yes, our pleasure. Absolutely. All right, looks like we're just down to 9 attendees left. Kierra, if you're good to go and you've received all the thank yous from chat, you can also log out with the button at the bottom of the toolbar.
Okay. All righty. Thank you so much.
All right, have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much.